Hey everyone, welcome to Strange Stories, where we explore near-death experiences and supernatural stories from people who've had a glimpse of the other side. If you enjoy our content, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel. Without further ado, let's get to the story of the day. I fell and broke my back around 1980. In my neck, I crushed 3 vertebrae and chipped 2. It's been 30 years of progressively worsening pain and the need for disability since the age of 55. Previously, I worked as a charismatic and Pentecostal pastor and evangelist. For years, I had many spiritual gifts that operated through me, and I believe that is helping me with the spiritual side. In other words, I didn't wake up freaked out by the Spirit's energy. However, this is different from what I had experienced for the previous 30 years. My wife and I later relocated to Louisiana. After years of painkillers, screws, plates, and spinal stimulators, to name a few, I decided to detox for a year because I was such on a high dose of painkillers. I was actually losing my will. I was emotionally dead and physically dying. This began in November 2009. The doctors put me on 180 milligrams of oxycodone, 120 milligrams of methadone, and a variety of other medications, including muscle relaxers. I promised myself that by the grace of God, I would be free of anything that could take my will and life. I got started. It was the most dreadful 11 months I'd ever known. I blew out all of my stomach muscles from vomiting so much. They still need to be repaired. However, as I became weaker and weaker, I persisted with the detox. I finished my last oxycodone in June 2010, and then it was just me and methadone. After being on this medication at the maximum legal dose for so long, the chances of successfully discontinuing it were 1 in 4. I decided I was going to die. So it won. When I dropped to 40 milligrams, I started getting sicker by the day. I would sometimes go 20 days without leaving the house because I was too sick and in too much pain to move. I went to the emergency room twice and stayed in the hospital for 5 days during the dosage reduction period from 40 milligrams to 30 milligrams. I'd only been home for 1 day after being released from the hospital. Because I thought I was going to die soon, I prepared my wife by calling about life insurance and telling her passwords and the location of personal belongings, among other things. We were as prepared as we could be based on my instincts. I became very ill on my second day home, a Sunday in September. I told my wife to dial 911 because I was about to die. It was approximately 10 a.m. I recall some of the car ride to the hospital. On this side, the last thing I remember is a nurse applying nitro patch to my chest. My blood pressure had been as high as 250 over 115 for months, and my pulse rate was 30. Doctors were unable to get my vital signs to balance. My registered nurse daughter placed her hand on my chest around 2 p.m. She claimed that I said, "My chest hurts," and then collapsed. My doctor told me that I could have gone for 5 minutes without a heartbeat. I had signed a living will in the week before, which stated that I would not be resuscitated. I was exhausted and sick. Every day, I prayed to die and be free of my wounded emotions and body. I was perplexed when I awoke from an induced coma. My ribs had been broken. The agony was unbearable. I was angrier than I'd ever been. I stayed like that for nearly 2 weeks. I couldn't believe I was still here in this agonizing body of emotions. As previously stated in the living will, do not resuscitate. My daughter started screaming code as the emergency room doctor picked up my chart to see where I was living. The doctor immediately dropped my chart, approached me, began CPR, and everything that followed. I was enraged because this was clearly not my plan, but it was unquestionably God's plan. It took a few days for me to recall my NDE. It perplexed me. I was completely enveloped in darkness. It was velvet dark, as one person who had the same experience told me, and I said yes. It was a velvet dark, but as a mortal, I cannot express how peaceful, warm, protected, pain-free, and most importantly, emotional pain did not exist. I mentioned earlier that I was perplexed because I didn't see any lights, tunnels, or loved ones who had crossed over. I believe God bestowed upon me the perfect heaven. As previously stated, I refused resuscitation. I just wanted to be free of sickness, pain, and drugs. The location I chose was ideal for my needs. It was as if the lights had gone out and life had come to an end. The darkness perplexed me because of my conservative religious upbringing. I used to believe that darkness was bad and light was good, but I would have been completely wrong. I can still recall a few minutes and return to that place in my memory of great protection and love. Then the trouble began. Because the hospital was unfamiliar to me, I assumed I was fine. I didn't consider the possibility that I had become disconnected from the world as I'd known it. When I walked into my house, which I hadn't left in a year, it was as if I'd never been there before, even though it was both familiar and strange. Something bad had happened, and I knew what it was. After about an hour of being at home, I began to have an inner child experience. I'd been molested as a child, but I'd repressed it so much that I had no idea it had happened. I couldn't recall the specifics, but I assumed it had been resolved. I was about to discover the source of my behavior over the previous 47 years. I got down on my knees and buried my face in my wife's stomach, sobbing uncontrollably. I began to see the reality of the suppressed memory as I cried. I began to notice that a music evangelist who had been brought into the church had molested me at least 25 times in a year. At the time, guests were simply placed in the same bed as the children, which was a poor decision. I was overwhelmed. I realized why I had harbored such resentment toward my mother since childhood. The reason I felt so safe in the black velvet was that the majority of the molestation occurred within 5 feet of my parents. Things like that were simply not discussed back then. After several hours, I called my 82-year-old mother and apologized for being so difficult. I felt she and my father failed to protect me when I needed it the most. I explained everything to her. I completely understood how things would happen, be discovered, and then be forgotten. I spent the next few days dealing with 4 other issues that needed to be addressed. For years, I had been wrong to be angry about the issues. 3 involved issues that arose as a result of the molestation's wounds. I started talking. I assumed that everyone would see what I'd seen and so on. It was a bad decision. The sooner a person recognizes the truth and stops talking to everyone, the better. I only have a few people I can trust with this matter. In order to live in the good old belt, I must be careful with my words when describing things. They did not change. It was I who did. The most difficult aspects are the after effects. It'll be the 8th week since I crossed over. I'm so uneducated. I didn't sit and stare for more than a week. I started researching right away. Thank you, IANDS.org. The people have been amazing. NDEers are extremely fortunate to have people like PMH Atwater. She had no information or assistance at the time of her NDE, but she was able to find some of her own. Let's get started on healing my body. I used 2 walking sticks before crossing the bridge. I attempted to purchase a wheelchair that would fit through our house's doors, etc. Golf was my favorite sport, and it was the one thing I wished I could do again. I kept my clubs, but donated every golf ball. Why would I keep golf balls when I'm walking with 2 canes? I went out and hit about 50 golf balls, ran with my 10-year-old granddaughter, and walked about 2 miles 5 weeks after my NDE. I went out on Sunday and hit 60 golf balls, the majority of which were with the driver. The memory has returned to me. Years ago, I lost my sense of smell. I'm smelling again. Before the NDE, my blood pressure was 225/115 plus 30. I'm now off blood pressure medication and have a blood pressure of 120/70 plus 60, which is nothing short of a miracle. The only thing left is severe arthritis pain, but I think it'll keep me humble. After all, I am aware that I still have a body. I used to be a vegetarian, but I stopped. I had started eating raw food again several months before my NDE. I had gone vegetarian in order to regain my health. I love my diet now. I don't want to eat much cooked food. I lost 50 pounds simply by eating properly. I'm astounded by how good I feel after the NDE. My energy level has skyrocketed. I learned what the majority of NDEers learn. When we cross over, all that matters is whether we loved and how we treated others. I read 1 Corinthians 13 as often as I can. This entire chapter is about agape love, which is the God kind of love. The love that loves the unlovable or even those we may believe do not deserve to be loved. Only God can love through a person like the one described in this chapter. When most people have an NDE, they return more loving. I'm just trying to let people in and around me see things through God's eyes. What caused them to be the way they are? What kind of strain are they under? Everyone is dealing with something right now. I never want to become so busy that I can't see people. In this life, all we need and can give is love. I wish all of us the best. This has now become the most wonderful event in my life. Every day is like Christmas for a child. I'm curious what will happen today. Why me? I thought it was a curse at first, and I believed it. But after only 8 weeks, I know it is the greatest blessing of my life. May love always be our guide.